Question 1. The evaluation methodology shows that during a practical driving assessment in South Australia, an examiner observes a candidate hesitate significantly, a give way sign, resulting in a near miss with another vehicle. The candidate also fails to check their blind spot during a lane change, although the maneuver itself is otherwise smooth. The examiner knows the candidate personally and is aware they have been practicing extensively for this test. Considering the ethical and regulatory framework for driver licensing in South Australia, what is the most appropriate course of action for the examiner? Option A. Pass the candidate, rationalizing that the near miss was minor and the lane change was otherwise smooth, and considering their extensive practice. Option B. Fail the candidate due to the critical safety lapse at the give way sign and the omission of a blind spot check, as these indicate a potential risk to road safety and a failure to meet licensing standards. Option C. Fail the candidate solely for the near miss at the give way sign, but pass them on the blind spot check as the lane change was otherwise smooth. Option D. Pass the candidate because they are a personal acquaintance and the examiner is aware of their significant practice efforts, ensuring they do not feel discouraged. Correct answer is B. Fail the candidate due to the critical safety lapse at the give way sign and the omission of a blind spot check, as these indicate a potential risk to road safety and a failure to meet licensing standards. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for a driver's license with the paramount importance of road safety and adherence to South Australian licensing regulations. The examiner is in a position of authority and trust, with a responsibility to ensure that only competent and safe drivers are licensed. The temptation to overlook minor issues for a candidate who appears eager or has invested significant effort can compromise this responsibility. The best approach involves a thorough and objective assessment of the candidate's performance against the official South Australian driver's license testing criteria. This means meticulously observing all aspects of the driving task, including hazard perception, vehicle control, adherence to road rules, and decision-making. If any critical errors or a pattern of minor errors are observed that indicate a lack of competence or a potential risk to road safety, the examiner must fail the candidate. This is correct because the Road Traffic Act 1961, SA, and associated regulations mandate that a license is only issued to individuals who demonstrate the required level of skill and knowledge to drive safely. The examiner's duty is to uphold these standards, ensuring public safety, which is the primary ethical and legal obligation. An incorrect approach would be to pass the candidate despite observing a significant hesitation at a give way sign, leading to a near miss with another vehicle. This is a failure to uphold the core safety principles of the South Australian licensing system. Such an action directly contravenes the objective of preventing unsafe drivers from operating vehicles on public roads and could lead to accidents, violating the examiner's duty of care and the spirit of the licensing legislation. Another incorrect approach would be to overlook the candidate's failure to check blind spots during a lane change, rationalizing that the lane change was otherwise smooth. This demonstrates a lack of diligence in assessing critical safety procedures. Blind spot checks are fundamental to safe lane changes, and their omission indicates a potentially dangerous driving habit that could result in collisions. The examiner's role is to identify and address such deficiencies, not to excuse them. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to pass the candidate because they are a friend and the examiner knows they have been practicing extensively. This constitutes a severe ethical breach and a direct violation of the impartiality required of a licensing examiner. Personal relationships must never influence the assessment process, as this undermines the integrity of the licensing system and compromises public safety by potentially licensing an unqualified individual. The professional reasoning process for such situations should involve a clear understanding of the South Australian driver's license testing standards, a commitment to impartiality, and a focus on objective observation. Examiners should be trained to identify critical errors and patterns of behavior that indicate a risk to road safety. When in doubt, erring on the side of caution and failing a candidate who does not meet the required standards is the only professionally responsible course of action, as the consequences of licensing an unsafe driver are far more severe than delaying a license for a candidate who needs further practice. Question 2. Analysis of a situation where a licensed driver in South Australia has recently moved to a new residential address, but has not yet updated their details with the Department for Infrastructure and Transport, considering the immediate need to travel for a family emergency. What is the most ethically and legally sound course of action regarding the address update? Option A. Assume that mail will still reach them at the old address, or that friend at the new address will pass on any important correspondence. Option B. Inform a close friend or family member verbally about the new address, considering this sufficient notification. Option C. Immediately update the residential address with the Department for Infrastructure and Transport before undertaking any non-essential travel, or as soon as practically possible if the travel is urgent and unavoidable. Option D. Delay updating the address until the next time the driver's license is due for renewal, as the current license remains valid. The correct answer is C. Immediately update the residential address with the Department for Infrastructure and Transport before undertaking any non-essential travel, or as soon as practically possible if the travel is urgent and unavoidable. Explanation. Analysis of this scenario reveals a professional challenge rooted in balancing immediate personal convenience against the fundamental legal and ethical obligations of a licensed driver in South Australia. The core conflict lies in the temptation to bypass a minor but mandatory procedural step due to perceived urgency or inconvenience, potentially compromising road safety and legal compliance. Careful judgment is required to ensure that personal circumstances do not override established safety protocols and legal requirements. The correct approach involves prioritizing immediate adherence to South Australian road rules, specifically the requirement to report a change of address to the Department for Infrastructure and Transport, the relevant authority for driver licensing in SA. This approach is correct because it directly upholds the legal obligation placed upon all licensed drivers in South Australia to maintain accurate contact information with the licensing authority. This ensures that official communications, including important notifications about license status, renewals, or any legal requirements, can reach the driver effectively. Ethically, it demonstrates responsibility and respect for the regulatory framework designed to maintain public safety and order on the roads. An incorrect approach involves delaying the address update until a more convenient time, such as when renewing the license. This is professionally unacceptable because it breaches the legal requirement to report changes promptly. It creates a risk that the driver might miss crucial communications from the Department for Infrastructure and Transport, potentially leading to unintended breaches of licensing conditions or even license suspension without the driver's knowledge. This failure to comply with a clear regulatory mandate undermines the integrity of the licensing system and demonstrates a lack of due diligence. Another incorrect approach involves assuming that the old address is still sufficient for communication, perhaps because mail is occasionally forwarded. This is professionally unacceptable, as it relies on an unreliable assumption rather than fulfilling a specific legal duty. The onus is on the driver to ensure the Department for Infrastructure and Transport has their current address, not to hope that mail will find its way. This approach disregards the explicit regulatory requirement and introduces unnecessary risk. A further incorrect approach involves believing that a verbal notification to a friend or family member at the new address constitutes a sufficient update. This is professionally unacceptable because it completely bypasses the official channels required by South Australian law for updating driver licensing information. The Department for Infrastructure and Transport requires formal notification through their designated procedures. An informal communication does not meet this legal standard. The professional reasoning framework for similar situations involves a clear hierarchy of obligations. Legal requirements always supersede personal convenience. When faced with a situation where personal circumstances might tempt a deviation from a rule, a professional driver in South Australia should first identify the specific road rule or licensing requirement applicable. Then, they must assess whether their proposed action complies with that rule. If there is any doubt, or if the proposed action involves a delay or bypass of a mandatory procedure, the professional decision is to adhere strictly to the established legal and regulatory framework, even if it requires extra effort or a slight inconvenience. This ensures ongoing compliance, maintains road safety, and upholds professional integrity. Question 3. The review process indicates that a driver approaching an unmarked intersection in South Australia encounters another vehicle approaching from the left and a third vehicle approaching from the right. All vehicles are at a similar distance from the intersection. What is the safest and most legally compliant action for the driver to take? Option A. Stop completely and wait for all other vehicles to pass. Option B. Assume the vehicle from the left will yield and proceed through the intersection. Option C. Accelerate to pass through the intersection before the other vehicles. Option D. Slow down, observe all approaching traffic, and yield to the vehicle approaching from the right. The correct answer is D. Slow down, observe all approaching traffic, and yield to the vehicle approaching from the right. Explanation. The review process indicates a common challenge for new drivers in South Australia, understanding the nuances of right-of-way at unmarked intersections. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to not only recall the rules, but also to apply them dynamically in a real-world situation where other road users might not adhere to them perfectly. The potential for misinterpretation or conflict at such intersections necessitates a clear, decisive, and safe approach. The best approach involves a proactive and defensive driving strategy. This means approaching the unmarked intersection with caution, slowing down, and making a deliberate observation of all approaching traffic. The driver should then yield to any vehicle already in the intersection or approaching from the right. This aligns with the fundamental principles of South Australian road rules, specifically concerning right-of-way at intersections where no signs or signals are present, which prioritizes safety and predictability. This method ensures compliance with the Road Traffic Act 1961 (SA) and the Australian road rules, which emphasize the need for drivers to give way to vehicles on their right at unmarked intersections. An incorrect approach would be to assume the other driver will yield, especially if they appear to be slowing down. This is a failure to adhere to the established right-of-way rules and relies on an assumption that could lead to a collision. It demonstrates a lack of adherence to the Road Traffic Act 1961 (SA) and the Australian road rules, which do not permit assumptions about other drivers' intentions regarding right-of-way. Another incorrect approach is to proceed at full speed, expecting others to stop. This is inherently dangerous and directly contravenes the requirement to exercise due care and attention, as mandated by road safety legislation in South Australia. It shows a disregard for the safety of oneself and other road users. Finally, stopping completely and waiting indefinitely for a gap, even when there is no immediate traffic, is inefficient and can cause unnecessary disruption. While caution is important, an indefinite stop is not the prescribed method for navigating unmarked intersections when traffic is absent or clearly yielding. Professional reasoning in such situations requires a driver to prioritize safety above all else, followed by adherence to the specific traffic laws of South Australia. This involves a mental checklist. Approach cautiously, observe all directions, identify potential conflicts, and apply the correct right-of-way rule. Give way to the right at unmarked intersections. If in doubt, err on the side of caution and yield. Question 4. Performance analysis shows that when approaching an intersection in South Australia, a driver observes a green traffic light, but simultaneously sees a young child unexpectedly run onto the road from the footpath, directly into the path of their vehicle. What is the most appropriate immediate action for the driver to take? Option A. Proceed cautiously through the intersection, assuming the child will stop before reaching the vehicle, as the light is green. Option B. Honk the horn loudly and maintain the current speed, expecting the child to move out of the way. Option C. Swerve sharply to avoid the child without first applying the brakes. Option D. Immediately apply the brakes firmly to reduce speed and prepare to stop, while scanning for other hazards and signaling if necessary. The correct answer is D. Immediately apply the brakes firmly to reduce speed and prepare to stop, while scanning for other hazards and signaling if necessary. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a driver to interpret and react to a complex road situation involving multiple potential hazards and conflicting signals. The driver must prioritize safety, adhere to South Australian road rules, and make a swift, informed decision under pressure. The challenge lies in correctly assessing the immediate risks and applying the appropriate legal and safe driving practices. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a comprehensive assessment of all immediate environmental cues and a proactive, defensive driving strategy. This means the driver should first identify the primary hazard, the child running onto the road, and immediately apply the brakes to reduce speed and prepare to stop. Simultaneously, they should scan for other potential hazards, such as oncoming traffic or other pedestrians, and signal their intention to brake or stop if necessary. This approach prioritizes the immediate safety of the most vulnerable road user while maintaining awareness of the broader traffic environment, aligning with the South Australian Road Traffic Act 1961 and its associated regulations, which emphasize the duty of care for all road users, particularly towards children and in situations of immediate danger. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to focus solely on the traffic light signal and proceed cautiously without adequately reacting to the child. This fails to acknowledge the immediate and overriding danger posed by the child, violating the fundamental principle of avoiding collisions and protecting life, which is paramount under South Australian law. Another incorrect approach is to swerve aggressively without first braking. While evasive action might be necessary, an uncontrolled swerve without reducing speed significantly increases the risk of losing control, colliding with other vehicles, or causing secondary accidents, contravening safe driving practices, and potentially leading to breaches of duty of care. A third incorrect approach is to honk the horn and continue at the current speed, hoping the child will stop. This is a passive and insufficient response to an immediate, life-threatening situation and does not demonstrate the required level of proactive hazard management expected of a South Australian driver. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a systematic hazard perception and response process. This involves 1. Scanning the environment for potential hazards, 2. Identifying the most immediate and severe threat, 3. Applying appropriate control measures, braking, steering to mitigate the threat, 4. Maintaining situational awareness of other road users and environmental factors, 5. Signaling intentions clearly. This structured approach ensures that immediate dangers are addressed effectively, while maintaining overall road safety and compliance with South Australian road rules. Question 5. Compliance review shows a newly licensed driver in South Australia, SA, has passed their probationary license test. Considering the specific regulations for probationary license holders in SA, what is the most appropriate understanding of passenger restrictions when driving? Option A. Once a probationary license is obtained in SA, all passenger restrictions are lifted, allowing the driver to carry any number of passengers. Option B. Probationary license holders in SA must strictly adhere to passenger limitations as defined by the SA Road Traffic Act, which may include restrictions on the number and age of passengers, particularly during certain times. Option C. Passenger restrictions for probationary license holders in SA are flexible and can be interpreted based on common driving practices among peers. Option D. A probationary license holder in SA can carry additional passengers if they are friends, as long as the driver feels confident in their ability to manage the vehicle. The correct answer is B. Probationary license holders in SA must strictly adhere to passenger limitations as defined by the SA Road Traffic Act, which may include restrictions on the number and age of passengers, particularly during certain times. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driver in South Australia, SA, who has recently passed their probationary license test. The challenge lies in understanding and adhering to the specific conditions and restrictions associated with a probationary license, particularly concerning the presence of passengers and potential distractions. Failure to comply can lead to serious consequences, including license suspension and further penalties, impacting their ability to drive legally. Careful judgment is required to interpret the SA Road Traffic Act and associated regulations accurately. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough understanding of the South Australian probationary license conditions as stipulated by the SA Road Traffic Act. This means recognizing that probationary license holders have specific restrictions regarding the number and type of passengers they can carry, especially during certain hours or under specific circumstances. The correct approach is to strictly adhere to these regulations, which typically involve limitations on carrying more than one passenger under the age of 25, unless specific exemptions apply, e.g., family members. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the legislative intent of the probationary license system, which is to allow new drivers to gain experience in a controlled environment with reduced risk. Compliance ensures the driver is operating legally and safely, minimizing the likelihood of contravening the law and facing penalties. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves assuming that once the probationary license is obtained, all previous restrictions are lifted, and the driver can carry any number of passengers without concern. This is a failure to acknowledge and comply with the ongoing conditions of the probationary license as defined by SA legislation. It demonstrates a lack of diligence in understanding the specific limitations imposed on new drivers. Another incorrect approach is to rely on anecdotal advice from friends or other drivers who may not be fully aware of the current SA regulations. This approach is flawed because it prioritizes informal information over official legal requirements. The SA Road Traffic Act and its associated regulations are the definitive source of truth for driving conditions. A further incorrect approach is to interpret the rules loosely, believing that minor deviations, such as carrying one extra passenger who is a close friend, are unlikely to be noticed or enforced. This demonstrates a disregard for the spirit and letter of the law, which is designed to enhance safety for novice drivers. Such an interpretation can lead to unintended breaches of the license conditions. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a proactive and diligent approach to understanding and adhering to all license conditions. This involves consulting official sources of information, such as the SA government's Department for Infrastructure and Transport website or the SA Road Traffic Act itself. When in doubt, seeking clarification from official channels is paramount. A commitment to understanding and following the law, even when it seems inconvenient, is essential for responsible driving and maintaining a valid license. Question 6. Investigation of a learner driver in South Australia, SA, encounters a large pothole directly in their lane. What is the most appropriate and legally compliant course of action to manage this unexpected road hazard? Option A. Accelerate to try and drive over the pothole quickly, hoping to minimize impact. Option B. Immediately apply the brakes forcefully without checking mirrors or assessing surrounding traffic. Option C. Swerve sharply to the right to avoid the pothole without first checking for oncoming traffic or vehicles in the adjacent lane. Option D. Ease off the accelerator, prepare to brake gently, scan for other traffic, and steer around the pothole if safe to do so. The correct answer is D. Ease off the accelerator, prepare to brake gently, scan for other traffic, and steer around the pothole if safe to do so. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a learner driver in South Australia, SA, as they encounter an unexpected road condition. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need to react quickly to a hazard with the requirement to adhere to road rules and maintain control of the vehicle. Misjudging the situation or reacting impulsively can lead to dangerous outcomes, including accidents or breaches of SA road traffic law. Careful judgment is required to assess the immediate threat, the vehicle's capabilities, and the surrounding environment to make the safest and most compliant decision. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice in this situation involves a controlled and defensive reaction that prioritizes safety and compliance with South Australian road rules. This approach entails immediately reducing speed by easing off the accelerator and preparing to brake, while also scanning the surroundings for other road users or potential hazards. The driver should then, if safe to do so, steer around the hazard, maintaining a firm grip on the steering wheel and ensuring they do not swerve abruptly into another lane or off the road. This method aligns with the principles of defensive driving, which are implicitly encouraged and expected under the South Australian Road Traffic Act 1961 and its associated regulations, emphasizing the driver's responsibility to anticipate and avoid hazards. It also reflects the learner driver's obligation to demonstrate control and awareness, as assessed during the SA driver's test. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately slamming on the brakes without assessing the situation or checking mirrors. This can lead to a rear-end collision if a vehicle is following too closely, a loss of vehicle control, or an unnecessary emergency stop that could startle other road users. This action fails to demonstrate the required situational awareness and control expected of a driver, potentially violating the duty of care owed to other road users under SA law. Another incorrect approach is to swerve sharply to avoid the hazard without first checking for other vehicles or pedestrians. This abrupt maneuver could cause the driver to lose control of the vehicle, collide with another vehicle in an adjacent lane, or mount the curb, creating a new and potentially more dangerous hazard. This demonstrates a lack of judgment and consideration for the wider traffic environment, contravening the principles of safe driving and potentially leading to breaches of traffic regulations concerning lane discipline and safe maneuvering. A third incorrect approach is to accelerate through the hazard, assuming the vehicle can clear it without issue. This is a risky strategy that could result in damage to the vehicle, loss of traction, or an inability to control the vehicle if the hazard is more significant than initially perceived. It shows a disregard for potential risks and a failure to exercise due caution, which is a fundamental expectation for all drivers in South Australia. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a systematic decision-making process when encountering unexpected road hazards. This involves 1. Hazard perception. Immediately identify the hazard and its potential impact. 2. Risk assessment. Evaluate the severity of the hazard and the immediate risks involved. 3. Vehicle control. Assess the vehicle's current speed and stability. 4. Environmental scan. Check mirrors and blind spots for other road users. 5. Controlled action. Select the safest and most appropriate action, prioritizing deceleration and controlled steering over sudden, unpredictable maneuvers. 6. Compliance check. Ensure the chosen action adheres to all relevant South Australian road rules and regulations. This structured approach ensures that decisions are made based on a comprehensive understanding of the situation, promoting safety and legal compliance. Question 7. Comparative studies suggest that when a driver attempting their South Australian driver's license test unexpectedly swerves towards oncoming traffic, what is the most appropriate and legally defensible immediate action for the testing officer to take? Option A. Allow the driver to attempt to correct their error, providing only a verbal warning. Option B. Immediately apply the brakes and slash or steer the vehicle to a safe position to prevent a collision. Option C. Immediately terminate the test and verbally reprimand the driver for their dangerous maneuver. Option D. Verbally instruct the driver to correct their course but take no physical action to intervene. The correct answer is B. Immediately apply the brakes and slash or steer the vehicle to a safe position to prevent a collision. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a driver's desire to complete their test efficiently and the absolute requirement for safety and adherence to South Australian road rules. The examiner must balance the need to assess the driver's competency in a real-world driving environment with the paramount duty of ensuring the safety of the driver, the examiner, and other road users. Misjudging the situation or prioritizing speed over safety can lead to dangerous outcomes and a failure of the test, as well as potential breaches of the examiner's professional responsibilities. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves the examiner prioritizing immediate safety by taking control of the vehicle to prevent a collision. This approach is correct because the Road Traffic Act 1961, SAW, and associated regulations place a non-negotiable emphasis on safe driving practices. The examiner's primary responsibility is to ensure that the driving test is conducted in a manner that minimizes risk. If a situation arises where a collision is imminent due to the driver's actions or inactions, the examiner is legally and ethically obligated to intervene to prevent harm. This intervention, such as applying the brakes, is a direct application of the duty of care owed by the testing authority. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves allowing the driver to continue, assuming they will correct their error, even when a collision is imminent. This fails to uphold the duty of care mandated by South Australian road safety legislation. The potential for injury or damage outweighs the desire to see if the driver can self-correct in a critical moment. Another incorrect approach is to verbally warn the driver but not take physical control, especially when the warning is insufficient to avert the danger. A verbal instruction is part of the testing process. It becomes inadequate when the immediate threat of an accident overrides the need for a verbal cue. The examiner's inaction in such a critical moment constitutes a failure to act responsibly and prevent harm, contravening the spirit and letter of road safety laws. A further incorrect approach is to immediately terminate the test and verbally reprimand the driver without taking any action to prevent the collision. While the driver's actions may warrant test termination, the examiner's first priority in an imminent collision scenario is to prevent the collision itself, not to focus solely on the disciplinary aspect of the test. Safety must precede any punitive measures. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role must employ a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves continuous situational awareness, anticipating potential hazards, and understanding the driver's current capabilities. In a critical situation, the framework dictates an immediate assessment of the threat level. If the threat is high and imminent, the priority shifts from assessment to intervention. The examiner must be trained and empowered to take decisive action to ensure safety, even if it means prematurely ending the test or overriding the driver's control. This proactive approach is fundamental to maintaining public safety and the integrity of the driver licensing process in South Australia. Question 8. The investigation demonstrates a driver approaching an uncontrolled intersection in South Australia. Two vehicles arrive at approximately the same time. One vehicle is approaching from the driver's left, and the other is approaching from the driver's right. What is the legally mandated action the driver must take to ensure safe and lawful passage? Option A. Yield to the vehicle that appears to be traveling slower. Option B. Assume the vehicle that arrived first has the right-of-way. Option C. Give way to the vehicle approaching from the right. Option D. Proceed if the driver believes they can safely navigate before the other vehicles. The correct answer is C. Give way to the vehicle approaching from the right. Explanation. The investigation demonstrates a scenario where a driver's understanding of South Australia's road rules regarding right-of-way at an uncontrolled intersection is being tested. This is professionally challenging because misinterpreting or misapplying these rules can lead to dangerous situations, potential collisions, and breaches of traffic law, all of which have serious consequences for road safety and legal standing. Careful judgment is required to accurately assess the situation and apply the correct rule. The best professional approach involves a clear understanding and application of the South Australian Road Rules 2014, specifically Rule 131, which dictates that a driver approaching an intersection must give way to any vehicle on their right. This rule is paramount for ensuring predictable traffic flow and preventing accidents at intersections where there are no traffic control signals or signs. Adhering to this rule demonstrates a commitment to road safety and legal compliance. An incorrect approach would be to assume that the vehicle that arrived first at the intersection has the right-of-way. This is a common misconception, but is not the governing rule in South Australia for uncontrolled intersections. This assumption can lead to a collision if the vehicle that arrived later is on the right of the driver making the assumption. Another incorrect approach would be to proceed based on the perceived speed or size of the other vehicle. The South Australian road rules do not permit drivers to make subjective judgments about right-of-way based on vehicle characteristics. This introduces an element of unpredictability and risk into traffic interactions, which is contrary to the principles of safe driving. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to rely on eye contact or a wave from the other driver to indicate permission to proceed. While courtesy is important, it cannot override the legally mandated right-of-way rules. Relying on such cues can lead to misunderstandings and dangerous situations, as the other driver may not have fully understood the situation or may have made an error themselves. The professional reasoning process for such situations involves prioritizing adherence to established traffic laws, understanding the specific rules applicable to the given road environment, in this case, an uncontrolled intersection in South Australia, and making decisions that promote predictability and safety for all road users. When in doubt, the safest course of action is to err on the side of caution and yield the right-of-way according to the established rules. Question 9. In South Australia, a licensed driver has recently been diagnosed with a medical condition that, in their opinion, might occasionally cause brief periods of dizziness. They have discussed this with their doctor, who has advised them to be cautious. What is the most responsible and legally compliant course of action for this driver? Option A. Continue driving as usual, assuming the dizziness is infrequent and manageable, and wait to see if it becomes a more significant problem. Option B. Immediately inform the South Australian Registrar of Motor Vehicles about the medical condition and any potential impact on their driving ability. Option C. Rely on their doctor to automatically report the condition to the relevant authorities without further action from the driver. Option D. Only seek further medical advice if the dizziness becomes severe or causes an incident while driving. The correct answer is B. Immediately inform the South Australian Registrar of Motor Vehicles about the medical condition and any potential impact on their driving ability. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driver in South Australia, SA, who is experiencing a medical condition that could impair their driving ability. The core challenge lies in balancing personal responsibility for road safety with the legal and ethical obligations to report such conditions to the relevant authorities. Failure to do so can have severe consequences for the driver and other road users. Careful judgment is required to determine the appropriate course of action. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice in South Australia is to proactively inform the South Australian SA Registrar of Motor Vehicles about any medical condition that may affect driving ability. This approach aligns with the Road Traffic Act 1961, SA, and associated regulations, which mandate drivers to report such conditions. By doing so, the driver ensures that their fitness to drive is assessed by the appropriate authorities, who can then make informed decisions about licensing conditions or restrictions, thereby upholding public safety. This demonstrates a commitment to legal compliance and ethical responsibility. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to continue driving without informing the SA Registrar of Motor Vehicles, assuming the condition is minor or manageable. This is a direct contravention of the Road Traffic Act 1961, SA, which places a positive duty on drivers to report conditions that could impair their ability to drive safely. This failure to report can lead to penalties, including fines and disqualification. And more importantly, it endangers other road users. Another incorrect approach is to only seek medical advice, but not act on it by informing the authorities. While seeking medical advice is a responsible first step, it does not absolve the driver of their legal obligation to report to the SA Registrar of Motor Vehicles. The medical professional's advice is crucial for understanding the condition's impact, but the ultimate responsibility for official notification rests with the driver. A further incorrect approach is to rely on the assumption that the medical practitioner will automatically report the condition. While some medical practitioners may initiate a report, it is not a universal or guaranteed process for all conditions. The onus remains on the driver to ensure the SA Registrar of Motor Vehicles is officially notified, as per SA legislation. Professional reasoning. Professionals in South Australia should adopt a proactive and transparent approach when dealing with medical conditions that may affect driving. The decision-making process should involve 1. Recognizing the potential impact of the medical condition on driving safety. 2. Consulting with a medical professional to understand the nature and severity of the condition and its implications for driving. 3. Understanding the legal obligations under the Road Traffic Act 1961, SA, to report such conditions to the SA Registrar of Motor Vehicles. 4. Taking immediate steps to inform the SA Registrar of Motor Vehicles, providing all necessary medical documentation as required. This systematic approach ensures compliance with the law and prioritizes the safety of all road users. Question 10. The audit findings indicate a commercial vehicle operating in South Australia has recorded a fuel consumption rate of 15.5 liters per 100 kilometers over the last quarter, while the manufacturer's stated fuel efficiency for a comparable load is 13.0 liters per 100 kilometers. If the vehicle traveled 15.000 kilometers during this period, and the average fuel price in South Australia was $1.85 per liter, what is the additional cost incurred due to the higher than expected fuel consumption, and what is the percentage difference in fuel consumption compared to the manufacturer's specification? Option A. The additional cost is $4,305.00, and the percentage difference in fuel consumption is approximately 50%. Option B. The additional cost is $3,775.00, and the percentage difference in fuel consumption is approximately 50%. Option C. The additional cost is $4,305.00, and the percentage difference in fuel consumption is approximately 23%. Option D. The additional cost is $3,775.00, and the percentage difference in fuel consumption is approximately 23%. The correct answer is C. The additional cost is $4,305.00, and the percentage difference in fuel consumption is approximately 23%. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential discrepancy in the calculation of fuel efficiency for a commercial vehicle operating in South Australia. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires not only an understanding of vehicle mechanics and fuel consumption, but also strict adherence to South Australian road transport regulations regarding vehicle load and efficiency reporting. Misrepresenting fuel efficiency can lead to penalties, impact operational costs, and potentially affect road safety if it implies a vehicle is more capable than it is under certain load conditions. Careful judgment is required to ensure calculations are accurate and compliant. The correct approach involves accurately calculating the vehicle's fuel consumption based on actual distance traveled and fuel purchased, then comparing this to the manufacturer's stated fuel efficiency under a specified load condition. And finally, reporting any significant deviation in accordance with the South Australian Road Traffic Act 1961 and associated regulations. This approach is correct because it prioritizes factual data and regulatory compliance. The Road Traffic Act 1961, in conjunction with relevant Australian design rules ADR, concerning vehicle emissions and fuel consumption, mandates accurate reporting and adherence to specified operational parameters. By using actual measured data and comparing it against regulated benchmarks, the operator demonstrates due diligence and compliance. An incorrect approach would be to simply average the manufacturer's stated fuel efficiency across all operating conditions without accounting for actual load, terrain, or driving style. This fails to provide a true representation of the vehicle's performance and could mask issues that might be relevant for regulatory reporting or operational efficiency. Another incorrect approach would be to adjust the calculation to meet a predetermined target efficiency without a basis in actual measured data. This constitutes misrepresentation and violates the principle of honest reporting required by transport authorities. Finally, ignoring the audit finding altogether and failing to investigate the discrepancy is a failure of professional responsibility and regulatory oversight. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with acknowledging and investigating audit findings. This involves gathering all relevant data, odometer readings, fuel receipts, vehicle specifications, load manifests, performing calculations using accepted methodologies, e.g., liters per 100 kilometers, comparing results against regulatory standards and manufacturer specifications, and documenting the entire process. If a discrepancy exists, the next step is to identify the cause and take corrective action, which may include recalibration, driver training, or reporting the issue to relevant authorities as required by South Australian law. Question 11. Regulatory review indicates that a learner driver in South Australia is experiencing significant anxiety about their upcoming practical driving test. They have expressed concerns that their nervousness will impair their ability to perform the required maneuvers and demonstrate safe driving practices. Considering the South Australian Driver's Handbook and the Road Safety, Traffic Act 1988, SA, what is the most appropriate course of action for their driving instructor? Option A. Recommend that the learner focus exclusively on memorizing common test routes and specific maneuvers without addressing the underlying anxiety. Option B. Offer to provide subtle guidance or cues during the test to help the learner navigate challenging maneuvers. Option C. Advise the learner to simply act confident and proceed with the test, hoping their anxiety will not significantly affect their performance. Option D. Discuss the learner's anxiety, its potential impact on driving, and collaboratively develop strategies to manage it, reinforcing the importance of focusing on safe driving principles and test criteria. The correct answer is D. Discuss the learner's anxiety, its potential impact on driving, and collaboratively develop strategies to manage it, reinforcing the importance of focusing on safe driving principles and test criteria. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge for a learner driver in South Australia, SA, who is experiencing anxiety about their upcoming practical driving test. The core professional challenge lies in balancing the learner's emotional state with the strict requirements of the SA Driver's Handbook and the Road Safety, Traffic Act 1988, SA, regarding demonstrating safe and competent driving. The learner's anxiety could impair their ability to perform the required maneuvers safely and adhere to road rules, potentially leading to a failed test or, more critically, unsafe driving practices on the road. The driving instructor must navigate this delicate situation by providing appropriate support without compromising the integrity of the testing process or the safety of the learner and other road users. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves the driving instructor acknowledging the learner's anxiety, discussing its potential impact on their driving performance, and collaboratively developing strategies to manage it. This includes reinforcing the importance of remaining calm, focused, and adhering to the driving test criteria as outlined in the SA Driver's Handbook. The instructor should also reassure the learner that the test is designed to assess their ability to drive safely and competently, and that the focus should be on demonstrating these skills. This approach aligns with the ethical duty of care instructors have towards their students and the public, ensuring that only drivers who can operate a vehicle safely are licensed. It also respects the regulatory framework by preparing the learner to meet the objective standards of the test, rather than attempting to circumvent them. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is for the instructor to suggest that the learner just try to act confident and proceed with the test without addressing the underlying anxiety. This fails to acknowledge the learner's distress and the potential for anxiety to manifest as unsafe driving behaviors, such as hesitation, overcorrection, or distraction. This approach neglects the instructor's duty of care and could lead to a failed test due to performance issues directly attributable to unmanaged anxiety, or worse, a dangerous situation on the road. Another incorrect approach is for the instructor to offer to help the learner by subtly guiding them through difficult maneuvers during the test, such as by providing excessive verbal cues or anticipating their actions. This constitutes a breach of the testing regulations, which require an independent assessment of the learner's independent driving ability. Such actions would invalidate the test results and undermine the purpose of the licensing process, which is to ensure all drivers meet a minimum standard of competence and safety as defined by SA legislation. A further incorrect approach is for the instructor to advise the learner to focus solely on memorizing specific routes or common test scenarios, without emphasizing the underlying principles of safe driving and hazard perception. While familiarity with potential test areas can be helpful, an over-reliance on rote memorization can lead to a driver who is unable to adapt to unexpected situations or unfamiliar environments, which is contrary to the objective of producing safe and responsible road users as mandated by the Road Safety, Traffic Act 1988, SAW. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety, ethical conduct, and adherence to regulatory requirements. This involves active listening to the client's concerns, assessing the potential impact of those concerns on performance and safety, and then developing a plan that addresses the issue constructively and ethically. In the context of a driving test, this means ensuring the learner is adequately prepared not just technically, but also mentally, to demonstrate safe driving practices according to the established standards of South Australia. If a learner is demonstrably too anxious to perform safely, the professional decision is to postpone the test and work on strategies to manage the anxiety, rather than proceeding in a way that compromises safety or the integrity of the assessment. Question 12. Consider a scenario where you are driving in South Australia and approach an intersection with no traffic lights, stop signs, or give way signs. A vehicle is approaching the intersection from your right, and another vehicle is approaching from your left. Both vehicles appear to be moving at a similar speed. What is the correct procedure to follow to ensure safe and lawful passage through the intersection? Option A. Yield to the vehicle approaching from your right, as it has the right-of-way according to South Australian road rules. Option B. Proceed through the intersection cautiously, assuming the other vehicles will yield to you as you are already at the intersection. Option C. Flash your headlights to signal your intention to proceed, hoping the other drivers will acknowledge and let you go first. Option D. Stop at the intersection and wait for all other vehicles to pass before proceeding, regardless of their direction of approach. Correct answer is A. Yield to the vehicle approaching from your right, as it has the right-of-way according to South Australian road rules. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for new drivers in South Australia, understanding the nuances of road rules regarding yielding at intersections, particularly when faced with multiple vehicles. The professional challenge lies in correctly interpreting the South Australian road rules and applying them to a dynamic traffic situation, ensuring the safety of oneself and other road users. Misinterpreting these rules can lead to dangerous situations, potential accidents, and breaches of traffic law. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves a thorough understanding of South Australia's specific road rules concerning yielding at intersections. This means recognizing that at an intersection with no signs or signals, vehicles approaching from the right have priority. In this scenario, the vehicle approaching from the right has the right-of-way. Therefore, the driver must yield to that vehicle before proceeding. This aligns with the fundamental principle of road safety in South Australia, which prioritizes predictable and lawful behavior to prevent collisions. Adhering to the give way to the right rule at unmarked intersections is a cornerstone of safe driving in SA. Incorrect approach is analysis. Proceeding without yielding to the vehicle on the right is incorrect because it directly violates South Australian Road Rule 56, which mandates yielding to a vehicle approaching from the right at an intersection with no signs or signals. This action creates an immediate risk of a collision. Assuming the other vehicle will yield because it appears to be moving slower is incorrect. Traffic laws in South Australia are based on clear rules of priority, not on assumptions about other drivers' intentions or speeds. Relying on such assumptions is dangerous and can lead to misjudgments. Flashing headlights to signal intent to proceed is not a legally recognized method of yielding or claiming right-of-way at an intersection in South Australia. While drivers may use lights to communicate, it does not override the established road rules and can be misinterpreted, leading to confusion and potential accidents. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first identifying the type of intersection and any applicable signs or signals. If none are present, they must recall and apply the default rule for South Australia, which is to give way to the vehicle approaching from the right. If there is any doubt about right-of-way or the intentions of other drivers, the safest course of action is always to yield. This prioritizes safety and adherence to the law over asserting a perceived right-of-way. Question 13. Upon reviewing a road situation in South Australia where a cyclist is positioned in the driver's lane and an oncoming vehicle is approaching, what is the most appropriate immediate action for the driver to take? Option A, immediately slow down and prepare to stop. Option B, swerve into the oncoming lane to avoid the cyclist. Option C, maintain current speed and assume the cyclist will move. Option D, honk the horn repeatedly while maintaining current speed. Correct answer is A, immediately slow down and prepare to stop. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the driver to interpret a complex road situation involving multiple road users and potential hazards, all while adhering to the specific rules of the road in South Australia. The driver must not only recognize the immediate danger, but also anticipate the actions of others and make a safe, legal decision under pressure. The challenge lies in balancing the need for immediate action with the requirement to follow established traffic laws and safe driving practices. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves the driver immediately slowing down and preparing to stop. This is correct because South Australia's road rules mandate that drivers must always be prepared to stop if necessary to avoid a collision. By slowing down, the driver gains more time to assess the situation, observe the actions of the cyclist and the approaching vehicle, and make an informed decision. This proactive measure prioritizes safety and compliance with the fundamental principle of defensive driving, which is implicitly supported by the road rules' emphasis on avoiding hazards. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to maintain speed and assume the cyclist will move out of the way. This is incorrect because it relies on an assumption about another road user's behavior, which is inherently risky and contrary to the South Australian road rules requirement to take all reasonable steps to avoid a collision. It demonstrates a failure to anticipate potential hazards and a disregard for the cyclist's right-of-way or potential unpredictability. Another incorrect approach is to immediately swerve into the oncoming lane. This is incorrect because it creates a new and potentially more dangerous hazard by entering the path of an oncoming vehicle. The South Australian road rules strictly govern lane changes and overtaking, and such an action without a clear assessment of oncoming traffic and sufficient space would be a direct violation, demonstrating a lack of situational awareness and a failure to prioritize safety over a hasty reaction. A further incorrect approach is to honk the horn repeatedly and continue at the same speed. While honking can alert others, doing so without reducing speed or preparing to stop in this situation is insufficient. The road rules require more than just an alert. They require a driver to actively manage their vehicle's speed and position to ensure safety. This approach fails to address the immediate risk of collision and relies solely on the hope that the horn will resolve the situation, which is not a safe or legally compliant strategy. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a systematic decision-making process when faced with such situations. This involves 1. Hazard identification, recognizing the potential conflict between the cyclist, the approaching vehicle, and their own vehicle. 2. Risk assessment, evaluating the likelihood and severity of a collision based on speeds, distances, and potential actions of other road users. 3. Rule application, recalling and applying relevant South Australian road rules, particularly those pertaining to yielding, speed management, and avoiding collisions. 4. Action selection, choosing the safest and most legally compliant course of action, which prioritizes slowing down and preparing to stop to gain control and time for further assessment. 5. Continuous monitoring, remaining vigilant and ready to adjust the chosen action as the situation evolves. Question 14. When evaluating the impact of a sudden downpour of heavy rain on your driving conditions while traveling on a South Australian road, which of the following actions best demonstrates adherence to safe driving practices and South Australian road rules? Option A. Increase your speed to try and drive through the heavy rain quickly. Option B. Reduce your speed significantly and increase the distance between your vehicle and the vehicle in front. Option C. Immediately pull over to the side of the road and stop until the rain ceases. Option D. Maintain your current speed and continue driving as you were before the rain started. The correct answer is B. Reduce your speed significantly and increase the distance between your vehicle and the vehicle in front. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a driver to make a judgment call in a situation where road conditions are deteriorating rapidly, potentially impacting vehicle control and the safety of themselves and other road users. The driver must balance the need to reach their destination with the paramount responsibility of operating a vehicle safely and in compliance with South Australian road rules. This requires an understanding of defensive driving principles and the specific regulations concerning adverse weather conditions. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves prioritizing safety and compliance with South Australian road rules by reducing speed and increasing following distance. This aligns with the fundamental principles of defensive driving, which emphasize anticipating hazards and adjusting driving behavior to suit prevailing conditions. Specifically, the Road Traffic Act 1961, SAW, and associated regulations implicitly require drivers to maintain a speed that allows them to stop safely and to drive with due care and attention. Reducing speed and increasing following distance directly addresses the reduced visibility and increased stopping distances associated with heavy rain, thereby minimizing the risk of a collision and ensuring compliance with the general duty of care expected of all drivers in South Australia. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to maintain the current speed and continue as normal, assuming the rain is only temporary. This fails to acknowledge the increased risks associated with heavy rain, such as reduced tire grip, obscured vision, and the potential for hydroplaning. Ethically and legally, this demonstrates a lack of due care and attention, potentially violating the Road Traffic Act 1961, SAW, by driving in a manner that endangers oneself or others. Another incorrect approach is to pull over to the side of the road immediately and stop until the rain stops. While seemingly safe, this may not always be the most appropriate or safest action. Stopping abruptly on the side of a road, especially if it is a busy highway or a narrow lane, could create a hazard for other vehicles. Furthermore, the Road Traffic Act 1961, SAW, does not mandate stopping for any rainfall. Rather, it requires drivers to adapt their driving. This approach fails to consider the potential for creating a new hazard. A further incorrect approach is to increase speed to try and outrun the heavy rain. This is a dangerous and counterproductive strategy. Increased speed in heavy rain significantly reduces a driver's ability to react to hazards, increases the risk of hydroplaning, and makes it more difficult to maintain control of the vehicle. This directly contravenes the requirement to drive at a speed that is safe for the conditions, as stipulated by the spirit and letter of South Australian road traffic legislation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a risk assessment framework. This involves identifying the hazard heavy rain, assessing the risks reduced visibility, hydroplaning, loss of control, and implementing control measures, reducing speed, increasing following distance. They should always err on the side of caution when conditions are uncertain or deteriorating, prioritizing the safety of themselves and others above all else, and ensuring their actions are consistent with South Australian road traffic laws. Question 15. The analysis reveals that a learner driver in South Australia, under the supervision of a qualified driver, is approaching a traffic light-controlled intersection when the light turns amber. Considering the South Australian road rules and the principles of safe driving, what is the most appropriate course of action for the supervising driver to instruct the learner to take? Option A. Instruct the learner to stop in the intersection if they have already entered it when the light turns amber. Option B. Instruct the learner to brake as hard as possible to stop immediately, regardless of following traffic. Option C. Assess if it is safe to stop before the intersection, and if so, instruct the learner to stop. If stopping safely is not possible, proceed through the intersection. Option D. Instruct the learner to accelerate to pass through the intersection before the light turns red. The correct answer is C. Assess if it is safe to stop before the intersection, and if so, instruct the learner to stop. If stopping safely is not possible, proceed through the intersection. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario where a learner driver, accompanied by their supervising driver, is approaching an intersection controlled by traffic lights that have just turned amber. The supervising driver is a licensed driver of sufficient age and experience, as required by South Australian SA law for supervising learner drivers. The professional challenge lies in the supervising driver's immediate reaction and the potential for misinterpretation of the amber light's meaning, which could lead to unsafe driving practices or a breach of SA road rules. Careful judgment is required to ensure the safety of all road users and compliance with the Road Traffic Act 1961, SA, and the Australian road rules as adopted in South Australia. The correct approach involves the supervising driver assessing the situation to determine if it is safe to proceed through the intersection or if it is safer to stop. This assessment should consider factors such as the vehicle's current speed, distance from the intersection, and the presence of other vehicles or pedestrians. If stopping safely is possible, the supervising driver should instruct the learner to stop before the intersection. If proceeding is the only safe option, they should do so without undue hesitation. This aligns with the fundamental principle of road safety and the specific guidance within the Australian road rules regarding amber traffic signals, which indicate that the signal is about to turn red and drivers should stop if it is safe to do so. The SA road safety strategy also emphasizes proactive hazard perception and safe decision-making. An incorrect approach would be for the supervising driver to immediately instruct the learner to accelerate to beat the red light. This action directly contravenes the intention of an amber light, which is a warning to stop, and significantly increases the risk of a collision with vehicles entering the intersection on the red light or pedestrians crossing. Ethically, this demonstrates a disregard for the safety of others and a failure to uphold the responsibility of supervising a learner driver. Another incorrect approach would be for the supervising driver to panic and slam on the brakes abruptly without considering the following traffic. While stopping is generally preferred if safe, an unnecessarily harsh stop can lead to a rear-end collision, creating a different but equally dangerous situation. This shows a lack of controlled hazard assessment and potentially a failure to manage the vehicle's speed appropriately. A further incorrect approach would be for the supervising driver to instruct the learner to stop abruptly in the middle of the intersection if they have already entered it when the light turned amber. This is extremely dangerous and could cause a serious accident. The rules dictate that if you are in the intersection when the light turns red, you should continue through. The professional reasoning process for a supervising driver in such a situation should involve a rapid, yet calm, assessment of the immediate environment. This includes understanding the vehicle's dynamics, the road conditions, and the behavior of other road users. The primary objective is always safety. The supervising driver must recall and apply the relevant SA road rules regarding traffic signals and the principles of defensive driving. They should then communicate their decision clearly and calmly to the learner driver, providing instruction that prioritizes safety and compliance. This decision-making framework emphasizes proactive hazard identification, risk assessment, and the application of learned driving principles in real time. Question 16. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a learner driver in South Australia is approaching an intersection with a pedestrian crossing. On the crossing, a pedestrian is walking from left to right. To the learner's right, a vehicle is approaching the intersection. A cyclist is also present, riding parallel to the learner's intended path but slightly ahead and to the left. What is the safest and most legally compliant course of action for the learner driver? Option A. Proceed through the intersection cautiously, giving way to the vehicle approaching from the right as it is a vehicle. Option B. Accelerate to clear the intersection before the pedestrian reaches the learner's path. Option C. Slow down and prepare to stop, yielding to the pedestrian on the crossing first, then yielding to the vehicle approaching from the right. Option D. Stop and wait for the cyclist to pass before assessing the pedestrian and the approaching vehicle. Correct answer is C. Slow down and prepare to stop, yielding to the pedestrian on the crossing first, then yielding to the vehicle approaching from the right. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge for a learner driver in South Australia, SA, because it requires them to interpret a complex road situation involving multiple potential hazards and apply the South Australian road rules to determine the safest course of action. The presence of a pedestrian, a cyclist, and a vehicle approaching from the right, all in close proximity, demands a high level of situational awareness and adherence to defensive driving principles, which are core components of the SA Driver's Handbook and the Practical Driving Test. The learner must prioritize safety and understand the hierarchy of road users and their rights and responsibilities. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves the learner driver recognizing that pedestrians have the highest priority on roads, especially when they are on or approaching a pedestrian crossing. The learner should immediately slow down and prepare to stop, yielding to the pedestrian. This aligns with the South Australian road rules, which mandate drivers to give way to pedestrians on or entering a pedestrian crossing. After ensuring the pedestrian has safely crossed, the learner must then assess the vehicle approaching from the right. According to SA road rules, at an intersection with no traffic signals, a driver must give way to a vehicle on their right. Therefore, after yielding to the pedestrian, the learner should then give way to the vehicle approaching from the right. The cyclist, while also a vulnerable road user, is positioned in a way that their immediate path is not directly conflicting with the learner's intended path if the learner yields to the pedestrian and the vehicle. The learner's primary responsibility is to avoid a collision, and this sequential yielding prioritizes the most immediate and vulnerable road user first, then adheres to the standard intersection rule. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach where the learner prioritizes the vehicle approaching from the right over the pedestrian is incorrect because it violates the fundamental principle of giving way to pedestrians, particularly on a crossing. This demonstrates a failure to understand the hierarchy of road user priority and the specific SA road rules regarding pedestrian crossings. An approach where the learner attempts to proceed without slowing down or yielding to any of the potential hazards is critically incorrect. This shows a complete disregard for road safety, a lack of situational awareness, and a direct contravention of multiple SA road rules concerning yielding to pedestrians and vehicles at intersections. An approach where the learner focuses solely on the cyclist and attempts to navigate around them without adequately assessing the pedestrian or the approaching vehicle is also incorrect. While cyclists are vulnerable, the pedestrian on the crossing presents a more immediate and legally defined priority. This approach indicates a misjudgment of priorities and a failure to apply the correct sequence of yielding. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such scenarios by first identifying all potential hazards and then applying the relevant South Australian road rules in a prioritized manner. The decision-making process should involve 1. Hazard identification. Recognize the presence of the pedestrian on the crossing, the vehicle approaching from the right, and the cyclist. 2. Rule application. Recall and apply the specific SA road rules for pedestrian crossings and intersections without traffic signals. 3. Priority assessment. Determine the order of yielding based on the rules and the immediate risk. Pedestrians on crossings have the highest priority. 4. Action execution. Implement the decision by slowing down, stopping, and yielding as required, ensuring a safe margin for all road users. 5. Continuous monitoring. Maintain awareness of all hazards throughout the maneuver. Question 17. Implementation of a safe right turn at complex intersection in South Australia, SA, where a general green light is displayed concurrently with a flashing yellow right turn arrow, and a separate pedestrian crossing signal shows a red walking person symbol. What is the most appropriate action for a learner driver to take? Option A. Stop and wait for the pedestrian crossing signal to change to a green walking person symbol before considering the right turn. Option B. Proceed with the right turn immediately, as the general green light permits movement in any direction. Option C. Stop and wait for the flashing yellow arrow to turn solid green, as this indicates a protected turn. Option D. Proceed with the right turn only when the path is clear, acknowledging the flashing yellow arrow indicates a need for caution but permission to turn if safe. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the right turn only when the path is clear, Acknowledging the flashing yellow arrow indicates a need for caution, but permission to turn if safe. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a learner driver in South Australia, SA, by requiring them to navigate a complex intersection with multiple traffic signals and lane designations. The challenge lies in correctly interpreting the sequence and meaning of signals, understanding lane discipline, and making a safe decision under pressure, all while adhering to SA road rules. This demands a high level of situational awareness and knowledge of specific SA traffic regulations. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves a systematic and cautious observation of all traffic signals, including pedestrian crossings and vehicle-specific lights, before entering the intersection. This means understanding that the green arrow for turning right indicates a protected turn, allowing the driver to proceed without yielding to oncoming traffic, provided the path is clear. This aligns with the fundamental principles of the South Australian road rules, which prioritize safety and clear interpretation of traffic control devices. Specifically, Rule 119 of the Australian Road Rules, adopted in SA, governs the use of traffic arrows, stating that a driver may proceed in the direction indicated by a green arrow if the path is clear. This approach ensures the driver is acting on a clear signal and has assessed the immediate environment for safety. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to proceed solely based on the general green light, ignoring the specific right turn arrow. This is a failure to adhere to the specific instructions provided by the traffic control device. The general green light permits proceeding straight or turning left, if permitted, but the presence of a right turn arrow dictates the conditions for a right turn. Ignoring it could lead to a conflict with oncoming traffic or pedestrians, violating SA road rules regarding yielding and safe movement. Another incorrect approach is to stop and wait indefinitely, even after the right turn arrow has turned green. This demonstrates a lack of confidence and an inability to interpret the traffic signals correctly. While caution is important, an indefinite stop can obstruct traffic flow and potentially confuse other road users, leading to unsafe situations. The green arrow signifies permission to proceed when safe, and prolonged inaction is not a safe or efficient response. A further incorrect approach is to assume the green arrow applies to all directions of travel. Traffic signals are designed to manage specific movements. A right turn arrow is exclusively for vehicles intending to turn right. Assuming it applies to other movements is a misinterpretation of the signal's purpose and a direct violation of traffic laws, potentially causing collisions. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making process that prioritizes understanding and adherence to specific traffic control devices. This involves 1. Comprehensive observation of all signals present: general lights, arrows, pedestrian signals. 2. Interpretation of each signal according to the South Australian road rules. 3. Assessment of the immediate environment for safety, other vehicles, pedestrians, cyclists. 4. Executing the maneuver only when a clear and safe path is confirmed, guided by the interpreted signals. In situations with multiple signals, the most specific signal, like a turn arrow, takes precedence for the intended movement. Question 18. To address the challenge of assessing a learner driver's ability to maintain safe following distances on a South Australian road, an examiner observes the driver consistently tailgating the vehicle ahead, particularly when approaching a moderate downhill gradient. What is the most appropriate course of action for the examiner to take during the South Australia SA driver's test? Option A. Take no action, assuming the driver will naturally correct their behavior or that no immediate accident occurred. Option B. Immediately fail the driver without further explanation, citing a general lack of awareness of safe driving distances. Option C. Comment on the driver's ability to control the vehicle's speed without specifically mentioning the following distance or the associated risks. Option D. Calmly explain to the driver that their following distance is too short, particularly given the downhill gradient, and that this creates a significant risk of a collision according to South Australian road safety standards. The correct answer is D. Calmly explain to the driver that their following distance is too short, particularly given the downhill gradient, and that this creates a significant risk of a collision according to South Australian road safety standards. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a driver's desire to pass their South Australia SA driver's test and the absolute requirement to adhere to road rules and demonstrate safe driving practices. The challenge lies in identifying and correcting a subtle but significant deviation from safe driving behavior that could lead to a dangerous situation, while also ensuring the learner driver understands the underlying principle. The examiner must balance the need to assess competence with the responsibility to uphold public safety on South Australian roads. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves the examiner calmly and clearly explaining the specific hazard observed, the reason it constitutes a risk according to South Australian road rules and safe driving principles, and how the driver's action contributed to that risk. This approach directly addresses the learner's behavior, links it to the relevant road rules, e.g., maintaining safe following distance, anticipating hazards, and educates them on the consequences of such actions. This aligns with the objective of the SA driver's test, which is to ensure drivers can operate a vehicle safely and competently within the South Australian regulatory framework. The examiner's role is to assess and guide, ensuring the driver understands how to avoid future risks. Incorrect approaches analysis. Ignoring the behavior is professionally unacceptable because it fails to uphold the primary objective of the SA driver's test, ensuring public safety. It allows a potentially unsafe driving habit to go uncorrected, which could lead to accidents on South Australian roads. Simply failing the driver without a clear explanation of the specific infraction and its implications is also professionally deficient. While the behavior may warrant a fail, the test is also an educational opportunity. A lack of specific feedback prevents the learner from understanding their mistake and improving their driving skills for future attempts and for general road use in South Australia. Focusing solely on the immediate outcome, e.g., you didn't hit anything, rather than the underlying unsafe practice is inadequate. This approach overlooks the proactive element of safe driving, which involves anticipating and mitigating risks before they become immediate dangers. It fails to teach the learner the critical skill of hazard perception and avoidance, which is fundamental to safe driving in South Australia. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role should employ a systematic approach. 1. Observe and identify. Continuously monitor the driver's actions and the surrounding environment. 2. Assess risk. Evaluate the potential danger posed by any observed behavior against established road rules and safe driving practices specific to South Australia. 3. Provide clear and specific feedback. If a risk is identified, immediately and calmly explain the observed behavior, the associated risk, and the relevant South Australian road rule or safe driving principle. 4. Educate and guide. Explain why the behavior was incorrect and how to perform the action safely and legally in the future. 5. Document and decide. Based on the severity and frequency of infractions, make a professional judgment regarding the driver's competence to operate a vehicle safely on South Australian roads. Question 19. Examination of the data shows that when approaching an intersection in South Australia, a driver encounters a green traffic light, but a police officer is present and actively directing traffic to stop. What is the most appropriate and legally compliant course of action for the driver? Option A. Proceed through the intersection because the traffic light is green. Option B. Stop and wait for the traffic light to change to red, regardless of the police officer's directions. Option C. Proceed cautiously through the intersection while attempting to also observe the traffic light's indication. Option D. Comply with the police officer's direction to stop, even though the traffic light is green. The correct answer is D. Comply with the police officer's direction to stop, even though the traffic light is green. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a driver to interpret and apply road rules in a dynamic and potentially ambiguous situation. The presence of a police officer directing traffic introduces an element of authority that may override standard traffic signals, demanding careful observation and adherence to the officer's directions. Misinterpreting the situation could lead to a traffic infringement, a dangerous maneuver, or a collision. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves prioritizing the directions of the police officer over the standard traffic signals. This is correct because the Road Traffic Act 1961, South Australia, and associated regulations empower police officers to direct traffic. Section 60 of the Act specifically states that a person must comply with directions given by a police officer in relation to traffic control. This regulatory framework establishes the officer's direction as the paramount instruction in such circumstances, overriding the default rules of the road indicated by traffic lights. Ethical considerations also support this approach, as it prioritizes public safety and order by ensuring compliance with the authority responsible for managing traffic flow and preventing accidents. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to proceed solely based on the green traffic light, ignoring the police officer's signals. This fails to comply with Section 60 of the Road Traffic Act 1961, South Australia, which mandates obedience to police direction. It also demonstrates a lack of situational awareness and an unsafe disregard for the authority responsible for traffic management, potentially leading to confusion and danger for other road users. Another incorrect approach is to stop and wait for the traffic light to change, despite the police officer directing traffic to proceed. This also violates Section 60 of the Road Traffic Act 1961, South Australia, by not complying with the officer's direction. It creates an unnecessary obstruction and can disrupt the intended flow of traffic managed by the officer, potentially causing frustration and hazardous situations. A further incorrect approach is to attempt to proceed through the intersection cautiously while also trying to follow the traffic light's indication. This demonstrates indecision and a failure to clearly prioritize the officer's direction. It can lead to unpredictable movements and increase the risk of a collision, as other drivers may be reacting to either the officer or the light, creating a mixed and dangerous situation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that emphasizes observation, understanding of regulatory hierarchy, and prioritization of safety. In situations where traffic signals and police directions conflict, the professional's primary duty is to identify the authority with overriding power according to the relevant legislation. In this case, the South Australian Road Traffic Act 1961. This involves actively observing the environment, recognizing the presence and actions of law enforcement, and understanding that their directions supersede standard traffic control devices. A commitment to public safety and adherence to legal mandates should guide the decision, ensuring compliance with the most authoritative instruction. Question 20. Research into vehicle stopping distances is crucial for safe driving practices in South Australia. If a learner driver is traveling at 80 km/h on a dry, sealed road surface in South Australia, and their average reaction time is 1.5 seconds, what is the approximate total stopping distance? Assuming a typical coefficient of friction that results in a braking distance calculation of /frac text speed in km/h to 254 meters. Option A, approximately 43.7 meters. Option B, approximately 106.6 meters. Option C, approximately 75.1 meters. Option D, approximately 31.5 meters. The correct answer is C, approximately 75.1 meters. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in South Australia, SA, by requiring them to accurately calculate the stopping distance of a vehicle under specific conditions. This involves understanding the interplay of speed, reaction time, and braking efficiency, which are critical for safe driving and are directly assessed in the SA driver's test. This calculation can lead to an underestimation of risk, potentially influencing teaching methods or advice given to learners, which could have serious safety implications on SA roads. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves using the standard formula for calculating total stopping distance, which accounts for both reaction distance and braking distance. This formula, commonly used in driver education and safety assessments in South Australia, is total stopping distance equals reaction distance plus braking distance. Reaction distance is calculated as speed in km/h multiplied by reaction time in seconds, and then divided by 3.6 to convert to meters. Braking distance is calculated using the formula /text braking distance equals /frac text speed times g times mu where speed is in m/s. G is the acceleration due to gravity, approximately 981 m/s2, and mu is the coefficient of friction between the tires and the road surface. For practical purposes in SA driver training, a simplified but widely accepted formula for braking distance in meters, given speed in km/h, is often presented as approximately /frac text speed 254 assuming a typical coefficient of friction and road conditions. Therefore, the most accurate method is to calculate both components and sum them. This aligns with the principles of road safety education mandated by the SA Driver's Handbook and the Road Traffic Act 1961 (SA), which emphasize understanding vehicle dynamics for safe operation. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to solely consider reaction time and ignore braking distance. This fails to acknowledge the physics of a moving vehicle and the time it takes for brakes to bring it to a halt, leading to a dangerous underestimation of the distance required to stop. This directly contravenes the safety principles taught in SA driver education. Another incorrect approach is to only calculate braking distance without factoring in the distance the vehicle travels during the driver's reaction time. This also results in an incomplete and unsafe estimation of stopping distance, neglecting a crucial phase of the stopping process. A third incorrect approach is to use an arbitrary multiplier for speed without a basis in established physics or SA road safety guidelines. For instance, simply multiplying speed by a fixed number without considering the squared relationship of speed to braking distance or the impact of reaction time would be inaccurate and potentially misleading for a learner driver. This lacks the scientific rigor required for effective driver training in South Australia. Professional reasoning. Professionals should always prioritize accuracy and adherence to established safety principles and formulas. When dealing with calculations related to vehicle dynamics, it is essential to use the most comprehensive and scientifically validated methods. This involves breaking down the problem into its constituent parts, reaction and braking, and applying the correct formulas for each. Professionals should consult official SA driver training materials and relevant legislation to ensure their calculations and advice are aligned with regulatory requirements and best practices for road safety in South Australia.